ってきた。危ない。
Hello, Prater. My name is James Wilson, and I've been a truck driver for many years. In fact, I'll soon be retiring. I'm 58 years old, and during all this time on the road, I've experienced countless things, both during the day and in the dead of night. My son convinced me to share this story for your channel because, without a doubt, it has been the most eerie and grotesque thing I've ever lived through. And although it's hard to believe, I know there are people listening who have experienced similar events. Only when you live through something like this do you truly become aware that such things exist, and that evil never sleeps. Back in the 1990s, I was driving my truck to deliver construction materials to the south of the country. At that time, we didn't have GPS or any of today's conveniences. I didn't even have a cell phone. My only means of communication was the trailer's radio. But many times, especially when driving through the mountains or deep into the forest, the signal would drop. On this particular occasion, night had fallen and I realized I was lost. I kept looking at my map over and over, trying to find my bearings, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't figure out where I was. I knew I was in a high-altitude area surrounded by forest, because all I could see were trees and darkness in every direction. I tried using the radio, but as I expected, there was no signal. I couldn't call for help or contact anyone at all. Truthfully, I wasn't too frightened yet, but I was uneasy. The place was so dark, so imposing, and I was completely alone, unable to reach out to anyone. I didn't know what else to do, so I decided to keep driving and hope to find a small town ahead where I could ask where I was and get some help. That way, I could reorient myself and continue my trip. I couldn't tell you exactly how far I drove, but it was several miles before I noticed a faint light in the distance. At first, I didn't know where it came from, but it seemed like a good sign. It meant there might be a house or settlement nearby. As I got closer, I realized it was a small, old, and neglected cabin, tucked between trees in the middle of nowhere. I drove a bit closer, turned off my truck, and got out. Then I began walking into the woods toward the cabin. The atmosphere was dense, the sounds of the forest were heavy and intimidating. Beyond the dim light coming from the cabin, I couldn't see anything. I approached the door slowly and was just about to knock when I heard noises coming from behind the cabin. Curious and cautious, I decided to go around to the back. There, I saw another window glowing with light. I crept toward it and peeked inside. What I saw was the most disturbing, grotesque, and unsettling thing my eyes had ever witnessed. Inside, there was an elderly woman wearing a long white nightgown. Her hair was long, gray, and unkempt. In her thin, bony hands, she held a human head, a man's head, without eyes. She kissed the head on the cheek and then placed it carefully into some kind of container. I ducked down quickly before she could see me. My body was frozen with horror, my legs trembling, and my mind screaming at me to run. I tried to calm myself because I knew I had to get out of there without her noticing. Crawling quietly away from the cabin, I only stood up when I was far enough from the light. Then I ran toward my truck, which I had parked quite a distance away. I didn't want to drive past the cabin, fearing she might hear the engine and realize I had seen her. So, running on adrenaline, I decided to reverse my truck into the forest to turn around. But while doing so, I accidentally backed into a tree, creating a loud crash. Terror surged through me. I knew at that moment she must have realized I was there. I stepped on the accelerator, but then I felt the truck lurch. One of my tires had gotten stuck in the mud. Frantically, I looked back toward the cabin. And yes, she was there. She was staring straight at me through the window, her face expressionless, her eyes locked on mine. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there watching me, as if she knew exactly what I'd seen. It felt as though she could sense my fear. I'm sure of it. I kept trying to free the truck, pushing the accelerator as hard as I could. When I glanced back again, she was no longer at the window. Panic rose in my chest. I was seconds away from abandoning the truck and fleeing on foot. But suddenly, as if by some miracle, the tire came free. I floored the accelerator, determined to leave that place behind, and drove without looking back, at least, not right away. Eventually, I dared to glance at the side mirror. What I saw made my blood run cold. The old woman was chasing me. She was running unnaturally fast for her age. But that wasn't the worst part. From where I was watching, I saw her levitate. I swear, I saw her floating in the air, flying toward me. I knew then that I was in even greater danger and that my fate could be worse than whatever happened to the poor man whose head she had held. I didn't stop driving until I finally reached the state highway. In my haste, I nearly collided with an oncoming car. That jolted me back to my senses, and I slowed down. I checked the mirror again. She was gone. My hands and legs were shaking violently. I knew I couldn't keep driving in that state, so I decided to find somewhere to spend the night. First, I put as much distance as I could between myself and that cabin. I was still terrified that she might find me. Eventually, I found a roadside motel. There, they let me use the phone to call my wife and tell her everything that had happened. I needed to get it off my chest. I also called my boss, knowing he'd be angry because the delivery wouldn't arrive on time. Of course, I didn't tell him the whole truth. I feared he wouldn't believe me and would think I was just making excuses. He did scold me for the delay, but thankfully, he's a good man and knew I always did my job well. Still, he warned me that I had to deliver the cargo first thing the next morning. At the motel, I asked for the fastest route to my destination. Luckily, it didn't involve passing anywhere near that cursed place. Honestly, I still don't know how I ended up there in the first place. It wasn't even on my planned route. Don't judge me for not calling the police. The truth is, I was too scared. I knew they'd want me to take them back to the cabin, and under no circumstances did I want to return there, not even with company. I realize now that might have been a mistake. Who knows how many more terrible things that woman, witch, or whatever she was, may have done to other innocent people unfortunate enough to cross her path. I truly hope she's no longer alive. But even if she isn't, that thought might scare me more. I can't shake the feeling she could be one of those who sell their soul to the devil, gaining immortality to continue their evil deeds forever. That's the end of my story. I share it as a warning, be careful wherever you go. Evil exists in every corner of the world. There are people who make sinister pacts with dark forces in exchange for power, wealth, or who knows what else, and they are capable of committing the most heinous acts against innocent people to get what they want. Never venture down deserted roads you don't know, especially not in the middle of the night. You truly have no idea what you might encounter. Hello, Prater and community. My name is Olivia Miller. This didn't happen to me, but to my father, who was a trucker for a long period of time when I was a child. I have his permission to tell you this story, one he now shares with my brother and me as adults. It's a very impactful story because my father has always been a skeptical, serious, and straightforward person. He never makes things up and has never believed in ghosts or anything like that until this happened to him. Even now, he tries to justify it, saying he was tired or confused, but you can still see that deep down he is 100% certain it was real. My father often made long trips in his truck, at least 10 days away at a time. We wouldn't see him during that period, only talking to him on the phone when he called to check on my mother and us. He told us he had a colleague named Raphael. They got along well, and although they didn't see each other often, whenever they crossed paths at a rest area, they greeted each other warmly and chatted for a while. My father described him as a very pleasant and kind person. One afternoon, while driving as usual, my father had just eaten at a gas station and was ready for a 10-hour drive to his destination. It wasn't fully dark yet, but daylight was fading. That's when he saw someone in the distance hitchhiking. Normally, my father never picked up strangers for safety reasons, but as he got closer, he realized it was Raphael. Thinking Raphael's truck had broken down or he'd had an accident, my father didn't hesitate to stop. By then, it was almost completely dark. My father noticed something strange. Raphael, who usually greeted with a wide smile and a wave, just stood there silently. My father rolled down his window and asked if Raphael had an accident. He wasn't sure why he asked that, because there was no truck in sight, but Raphael answered with a dull expression that he had been walking along the road for days. His truck had broken down, and since nobody stopped to give him a ride, he decided to walk home to his family. This seemed strange to my father. How could Raphael abandon his truck and walk for days? Still, he told him to get in, but explained he first needed to deliver his cargo before taking him home. Raphael nodded without a word and climbed into the truck. During the drive, my father tried making conversation, asking how Raphael was doing, how his family was, and why he hadn't been seen at rest stops lately. Raphael only replied that he'd been busy, without a smile, looking completely serious, nothing like the Raphael my father knew. Feeling uncomfortable, my father turned up the radio and focused on driving. It was now fully dark, and my father looked for a rest area where they could eat, since Raphael claimed he hadn't eaten or drunk anything in days. But there were none nearby. Raphael just stared straight ahead, barely blinking, saying nothing. Then, suddenly, something deeply unsettling happened. Raphael began laughing uncontrollably, out of nowhere. His laughter was loud and eerie, but his eyes were filled with sadness and emptiness. My father felt nervous. Nothing they were hearing on the radio was funny, it was all tragic news, and the silence between them had been heavy. When my father asked why he was laughing, Raphael replied between fits of laughter, "I am condemned forever." At this point, my father thought Raphael might be under the influence of something, because his behavior was strange and incoherent. My father decided to ignore him until they reached a rest area, where he planned to drop him off and let someone else help him. He had an early delivery and couldn't be delayed. The drive felt endless. Raphael alternated between laughing and shouting as if in pain or desperation. Finally, my father saw lights ahead, a rest area. He parked and told Raphael to get out to eat, but Raphael refused, his face serious, not even looking at my father. So my father went inside alone to ask for help. Almost immediately, he ran into another old friend, who also knew Raphael well. My father quickly told him what had happened, finding Raphael hitchhiking, hearing strange comments, laughing out of nowhere. His friend listened silently with a confused look. When my father asked if he would help get Raphael out of the truck, the friend asked, "Are you sure it's Raphael, the same one we both know?" My father said, 100% sure. "Why would I lie? Come see, he's sitting right there." But his friend replied with something that froze my father to the bone. Raphael took his own life almost a month ago. His wife told us they were deep in debt, and he chose the easy way out. My father insisted it wasn't funny, he'd already had a long, exhausting night and wasn't in the mood for cruel jokes. But his friend swore it was true and admitted he also found it hard to believe my father had Raphael in his truck. They ran to the truck, but Raphael was gone. My father searched the cab, but there was no one there. His friend, now irritated, asked if this was some kind of joke. My father replied that he would never joke about something like this, especially about someone deceased, and that he hadn't even known Raphael had died. Seeing his fear and confusion, the friend believed him. They stood in silence for a while, trying to process what had happened, before my father decided to leave for the city to make his delivery and rest. His friend warned him to be careful, maybe it wasn't really Raphael who got into his truck. My father insists it was him, same body, same voice. But he never saw Raphael on the road again. To this day, he can't find any logical explanation. His final conclusion, it wasn't really Raphael, but something else that took his form to get into the truck. I personally think it might have been his soul, condemned forever, just as he said. That's something we will never know for sure. But what is certain is that this was completely paranormal. So, I asked the community, do you think it was Raphael's spirit that entered the truck, or something more sinister? If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. Good evening, Prater. For a long time, I've wanted to share my story with you and your audience, but honestly, I never had the courage. My story is strong, tragic, and something I still haven't been able to overcome. It happened several years ago, around 2009, while I was driving my trailer back home after a long day traveling all over the United States of America. I've been doing this job for many years. As I said, this is something delicate. It's still hard for me to talk about, so I ask for discretion. I was driving through highways in the north of our country. I had been on the road for over 8 hours without stopping because I didn't want to get caught driving at night. At that time, though I'm not sure if it's still the same, those routes were extremely dangerous due to organized crime. But night inevitably fell. For quite a while, I'd been holding in the urge to go to the bathroom, but I didn't want to stop anywhere because of the risks I just mentioned. Eventually, though, it was pitch dark, and I couldn't hold it any longer. With no gas station nearby, I decided to pull over and quickly relieve myself in the bushes. I know it wasn't the smartest decision, but I couldn't wait another hour until the next gas station. I parked carefully, of course. Strangely, that night the road was even more deserted than usual. The atmosphere felt eerie, almost oppressive. I decided to get it over with quickly, stepping off the road into the brush with my cell phone flashlight lighting the way. It was so dark I could hardly see anything. I was doing my business when, suddenly, I heard voices in the distance, deeper inside the woods where the trees were denser. I couldn't see anyone no matter how much I shined my light around. Fear started to creep in. I thought maybe someone was trying to scare me, so I hurried to finish and began heading back to my truck. But before I left, I heard it, clear as day, 2 male voices, almost whispering. "Help us, please." Those whispers, whatever they were, sounded so real that I couldn't just walk away without making sure no one was actually in danger. My legs were shaking, but I walked slowly into the vast, dark forest, shining my flashlight ahead and calling out, asking if anyone was there or needed help. No answer. The voices stopped completely, but for some reason, I kept walking. I can't explain why. Something inside me told me I needed to find something. Eventually, I reached a place where the trees were almost bare, their large branches reaching into the darkness. I swept my light around, and for a moment, there was only silence and infinite black. I stopped, unsure where to go next, until I heard it. Crying. I turned in every direction but saw nothing. Then I had the idea to shine my light upward. That's when I saw them. 2 bodies hanging from one of the trees. I screamed louder than I ever had in my life. They were young men, both with multiple wounds. I knew immediately they hadn't taken their own lives. Someone had done this to them and left them there, completely alone, hanging naked in the middle of nowhere. It was the most traumatic thing I have ever seen. When I snapped out of my shock, I ran, stumbling, crying, and tripping over everything in my path because I could barely see. Terrified and shaking, I jumped into my truck and drove away as fast as I could. Later, from a public phone at a gas station, I called the authorities anonymously. I feared for my life. That night, I don't even know how I made it home. My nerves were completely shattered. The images of what I'd seen stayed burned into my mind the entire trip. I couldn't stop thinking about those young men, about how horribly they had died. But more than anything, I couldn't stop wondering, were they the ones who had asked me for help? Those cries, those whispers before I shined my light upward, there was no one else there. No sound, no movement. It had to have been them, their souls, begging for someone to find their bodies. I never found out what happened afterward, whether the authorities went to recover them or not. Things like this rarely make the news, so I never learned their fate. But I always prayed for their souls, hoping they found the light and could rest in peace. I truly hope that's what happened. Still, nothing will erase the trauma, or that horrifying image, from my mind. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, nor would I wish anyone to be in those young men's place. That's my story. I feel somewhat relieved to have shared it here, because I've never told anyone besides my wife, out of fear. Thank you for listening. Good night to everyone. My name is Louis Jamie. My grandfather was a truck driver all his life. I still remember that when we were children, my siblings and I would sometimes get rides in his truck, and those are memories that never fade. He was a very good man, but also had a strong character. With us, however, he was always affectionate. He would often share stories from his time on the road, some good, some bad, and others terrifying. The one I'm about to tell you belongs to that last category. My grandfather traveled a lot in his truck. That was his job. Sometimes my grandmother traveled with him, but many times he went alone. In this story, he was completely alone, driving through Mexican highways to deliver a shipment. He begins by saying it was an afternoon like any other. He was driving, with about 5 hours left before reaching his destination. He was going slowly because it was drizzling and the road was wet. That day, he was hauling a double trailer, so for safety, he had to drive even slower. It was a rainy, completely grey day. The sky was almost black from the heavy clouds, and it looked like a big storm was coming, something that worried him because driving a double trailer in those conditions is dangerous, even for an experienced driver. The risk is even greater when you know you'll be crossing a road full of curves. Night fell. He kept driving slowly. There wasn't much traffic, which was good for him. The few cars that were on the road passed him immediately. He kept his eyes fixed ahead, windshield wipers on, and high beams lighting the way. Suddenly, he had to slow down even more because he was about to cross a long bridge. According to him, below was a dam, but it was almost dry. Only a little rainwater had started to collect. At first, he thought it was his imagination, maybe a trick of the rain or the wipers, but then he saw two people walking along the side of the bridge, an older woman and what seemed to be a girl of about 8 or 9 years old. As he got closer, he realized he wasn't imagining it. They were real. This struck him as extremely strange. There wasn't even a sidewalk for pedestrians, and it was uncommon for people to walk there, especially on a highway far from any town. That bridge was meant only for cars and trucks. He thought it was dangerous for the woman to be walking there with the girl, especially in the rain, where a car might not see them in time. So he decided to pull closer to offer them a ride, just to get them somewhere safe and dry. But almost as he reached them, the woman turned to look directly at him, and out of nowhere, she picked up the girl and threw her off the bridge. My grandfather slammed on the brakes so hard that, if he hadn't been wearing his seatbelt, he might have been injured. He sat frozen, staring in shock. Then the woman also jumped off into the void. He stayed there, paralyzed with terror. After a moment, he forced himself to react. He ran out of the truck to look down, hoping against all odds that maybe one of them had survived. But when he looked over the edge, there was nothing, no bodies. There wasn't enough water or current to have carried them away. He could still see the damp ground of the riverbed. He even crossed the road to look over the other side of the bridge, still nothing. He was shaken and confused but couldn't just leave. He knew their bodies should be down there. So he decided to call the police and explain what had happened. He climbed back into his truck to wait. About 40 minutes later, 2 patrol cars arrived. He told the officers everything he had seen, and they immediately went down to search. By then, my grandfather was exhausted, but he stayed because he wanted to know they had found the bodies. The hours passed into early morning, but the officers found nothing, not even footprints. They began questioning him, asking if he had been drinking or using any substances. They also asked for proof of his job, his license, and other documents, because they were starting to doubt his story. The officers were annoyed, saying he had made them work for nothing. My grandfather insisted over and over that it was real, that he had seen both of them walking on that bridge, the woman throwing the girl, and then jumping herself. But the officers kept saying there was no evidence and that it made no sense for 2 women to be walking there in the middle of the rain. After a while, they let him go before deciding whether to take him to the station. He left with more questions than answers, completely confused and still frightened, because he knew with 100% certainty what he had seen. Later, when he told other drivers about it, some said they weren't surprised. That bridge was infamous for countless tragedies, known as the bridge where people go to end their lives. They told him they wouldn't be surprised if what he saw were the souls of those who had died there, still trapped forever. Although my grandfather never believed in ghosts or anything like that, he says he has no choice but to believe that's what it was, because otherwise, he can't explain it. It's a story that always frightened us when he told it, because it's so terrible and so sad for the poor little girl. But in the end, these things happen more often than we think. On the highways and in desolate places, many sinister things happen at night. Good night. Click on the next video to hear another trucker story just as disturbing as this one.